specific development standards, things like that, it's going to be somewhat more complex to do. But try to get, you know, as much info out to the community as possible and info back to us as quickly as possible, as concise as possible. So we go over it structurally, point by point by point. I'll send it out, let's say, and I get, God willing, 100 emails back.
Yeah.
And they all have different ideas. But some have similar, some don't have similar. Then what we'll do here at the meetings is kind of look at those, compile them, offer feedback on why we think this may be good, this may not be good, so that a lot of the actual work of putting things together will be done by a working group that anybody's welcome to come to, but we'll be gathering information from many different sources. But this body, as it evolves, will form the primary working group with county present to try to structure this thing. And, you know, hopefully we'll have copies of this in front of us that we can scribble on and update it as we go to make it the most efficient as we can.
You've got a good, strong, cohesive committee here, okay? I see that committee as a clearinghouse and also somebody to set priorities and leadership,
right.
Okay? So what I would recommend is, yeah, you want 100 people to provide feedback, but you want them to provide feedback in a particular way, okay? So my suggestion is to provide some options. You know, these are the 3 things we're thinking about in this specific area as it relates to dogs or whatever it is, okay? Give them give them the general ballpark of your ideas and the directions you want to go in. It's going to be a lot easier to collect data. It'll be a lot easier to funnel it down and to figure out what your priorities are.
Yeah, it's like you, I think, mentioned dogs. You know, dogs is an issue, storage containers is an issue. You know, maybe give them a couple options on how many dogs per how many acres.
Or what you want to regulate. Yeah. What is it that we want to regulate? We want to regulate these 3 things, and this is how we want to do it. And that gives people sort of an idea of where you're going rather than picking fruit from the top of the tree.
So if you just ask people what they want, you can get a million different ideas.
Well, and I'll give you an example. With our review project, with the technical update, we had 20 some odd planners going through our work, okay? Do you know what it's like to get comments from 20 different planners? No, we're not going to try to decipher their thinking process, okay, and their 18-sentence explanation of the problem, okay? Instead, what we created was 9 standard responses. It's existing language and it means the same. This doesn't mean the same. Blank, you know, we gave them 9 categories of more or less all the possibilities. And what it did is it allowed us to sort of funnel everything down and create priorities and make sure that we were attacking the most pertinent stuff first.
And kind of what I think I might rely on is Susie and her team to help develop something like that to help keep us on track. Maybe
that's what we should be doing.
Because if you just say...
we should be creating the 4 or 5, you know, options.
Right, and we can.
Because we're in the community and we present them.
Understand. But if Susie gives us an initial draft of, let's say, 3 or 4 from the county, because they know these are the things that are hot button issues in the different standards, we can add 6 more if we want. You know, but we have a base to work from. Make it easier.
If you try to do that, you're going to have a 3-year bumpy ride.
Oh yeah, I don't want a bumpy ride.
It just becomes very difficult to manage that way. The community means well, but they don't know where you're going. You need to provide them with a little direction and leadership, as well as establishing priorities of what are the biggest things we need to address.
And I think that dovetails exactly in terms of having that documentation so that it's very clear all along the way, these are the priorities or these are the areas that we want the CSD update to address, because once we start getting to ordinance language, then it's a lot of words to as well. So it's needing to make sure that the actual words do what we mean them to do. So that's even a second process that's, you know, secondary. We need to make sure that the concept is clear, that the community agrees, you know, that's the direction the CSD should go in.
With this group here, as I say, I'll be sending out these documents here, and you'll be able to look at the different sections, look at the different things that are already addressed, and by the time we get together next time, not only will have you reviewed the structure for any, you know, discrepancies or whatever, but I'm sure you will come up with some ideas under each section, maybe where we need to go. And then we'll Susie here, and we'll have those documents, pretty much ready to go, whatever that next step may be. Yes, Sandy?
Probably rather my question, but, do you have, Mike, do you have feedback or ideas? I'm sure you have ideas, but have you gotten feedback about where we need to change our CSDs?
I have a few things.
Because we need to change them because there's some county things that we need to deal with, or are we just changing them? Are we changing them because, reviewing them for change, because they need to be reviewed, we think, because they're old?
Both aspects. We've got feedback on storage containers, we've got feedback on dogs, animals per lot. We also just finished the area-wide plan. That area-wide plan and the dark skies initiative, the county, the dark skies is more defined than our CSD is. So those need to be consistent. We need to make sure the language in our CSD is consistent with the area-wide plan, the new version of that, and builds on that. And
So we need to really be familiar, those of us who aren't
Yes.
familiar with that, be familiar with that.
yes, yes.
Excuse me. Where do we get copies of that?
Really?
This is a bigger job than I thought.
Yes, the dark skies is adopted, so.
Right.
Yeah,
I
it's,
mean, the whole area plan.
the
Right.
area plan, that's where the process now with county council, where we're finalizing the language. So that's actually not adopted yet by.
But the latest version is available.
The latest version is available online, but you'll maybe recall the supervisor directed a number of changes
Yes.
to the plan, so the current one that's online doesn't reflect that
Right,
yet.
40
But
different amendments, I think, for specifics.
there's quite a long list
Yeah.
that we're going through, yeah, but, we
So
can
when
certainly-
the document goes to the board, it won't be listed as all those separate items anymore.
No, it'll be integrated,
Okay.
yeah.
And that should be final by April. But you can go look at it now, and it'll give you a good idea of what's there with the town centers and on out from there, and being designated as a quote-unquote rural area very specifically. That's lacounty.gov.planning.something or other, TNC.
Planning.lacounty.gov.
And
And
then
then
slash
/TC.
One more time.
planning, so no HTTP.
Right there.
Oh,
If you
oh,
look-
yeah.
If you look on the second page,
Good.
The first part's the same, so,
you see the website there?
yeah.
Okay, the TU on the end will direct you to the technical update. If you just delete that, that's our main website.
Yeah, and for the area plan update, the three letters you'll want is the letter T, the letter N, and the letter C, TNC.
Instead of the TU.
Correct, yes. So
So TU
TNC
be
will
AV.
take you to the AV plan,
Right.
exactly, and TU is technical update.
Known as Town and Country.
And keep in mind, guys, you guys mentioned dark skies.
Yeah.
Dark skies is a wonderful example of how CSDs kind of went a little bit off in
Mhm.
each little community. They had great ideas, they weren't always enforceable,
Right.
or they weren't standards that could be enforced in
Right.
front of a judge, okay?
Mhm.
And a lot of frustration on the part of the communities because we couldn't figure that one out.
Right.
But then the board said, hey, we got to do something to deal with this issue. And they directed my staff, county-wide staff,
Mhm.
ordinance study staff, hey, come up with a rural standard that's enforceable, that we can apply across all of these communities that want something like this, and does what we need it to do.
Right.
And so that's what we spent a year on. We spent a year coming up with the dark skies ordinance. Very proud of that ordinance because
Absolutely.
it was implemented fairly flawlessly in terms of people jumping on board. And in terms of enforceability, we've had very little problem because it's very hard to argue with the science that is written into that ordinance. And that's how the CSDs are protected. Agua Dulce, Acton, Little Rock, Juniper Hills, the Malibu, all of those have the same standards. They have all the same protections. Before it was sort of willy-nilly all over the place. And that's kind of how my section's a little bit different from Susie's. Susie deals with community-specific
Right.
stuff. We try to deal with things from a county-wide approach. Okay? Even though rural is only the rural sections,
Right.
it's still county-wide rural, coastal, valley, mountains, whatever. So,
And that's a good example of what we're looking at because our standards were weak in that area. They weren't enforceable. and we kept pushing.
And now
that's
you've
what
got
the
it.
dark-
And now you
dark
guys can
skies.
lean on that, and
And
people
now all
have
we have to
real
do is
protections.
go out and recommend people change what they're doing to comply with it, because there's still a bunch of people out there that don't understand dark skies.
Well, I think too, Mike, that that's good news for the community, who might look on this process as more laws, you know, but it really isn't that, because in this case, he's protecting what the majority of people want anyway, and that is,
Absolutely.
they want dark skies at night.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Stars in the sky, not on the ground.
right, and I think we should make an effort to point those things out in publication and online and things like that.
Sounds good to me.
The people will feel better about it.
And of course, we rely on our press to do that largely.
The good letters to the editor, we're always welcome too.
Absolutely.
And that's an important thing as you guys get into this stuff, is enforceability. It's one thing to come up with the standards, like Susie says, is this doing what we wanted it to do in the first place, okay? The other question in the equation is, can I enforce this with science or with sound reasoning in front of a judge? Because that's where enforcement cases go if the guy decides to fight it. And we have to have solid arguments and a solid case. And so make sure, you know, Susie's team's pretty good about this, but some things sometimes get by, okay? You want to make sure that things that are put into your CSD can be enforced. That's really important, because then you just have sort of a false sense of hope.